It began the night I moved into the old apartment on Hawthorne Street. The building was nearly a century old, with dark hallways that smelled of mildew and old wood. My friends warned me it had a strange energy, that tenants rarely stayed long, but I dismissed it as superstition. The first week was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you can almost hear the building breathing. Then I found the candle. It was tucked behind the kitchen cabinet, hidden in a corner coated with dust. It was a simple white candle, about 6 inches tall, with no decorations or markings. I don't know why I lit it the first night. Maybe curiosity or the need for some warmth in the cold apartment. But as soon as I struck the match, I felt a sudden tension in the room, like the air itself had thickened. The flame burned steadily, unnaturally bright for such a small candle. I noticed then that it did not flicker, not even when a draft brushed across the room. I laughed at my own unease and left it on the counter, thinking I would blow it out before bed. When I returned, it was still burning. I tried to snuff it with my fingers. No pain, no wax sticking to my skin. It simply refused to go out. I blew and shook, even tried pouring water over it, but the flame remained unwavering. At that moment, my amusement turned to unease. There was a warmth radiating from it that felt almost alive, and in the shadows it cast, I swore I could see shapes moving. The first night passed with fitful sleep. I dreamed of a figure standing at the doorway of my apartment, face blurred, holding the candle. The dream felt real, like I had lived it in another life. When I woke, the candle was still on the counter. I told myself it was a trick of my mind, a new apartment anxiety, and I should ignore it. That night, the whispers began. Faint at first, just a sound brushing against my ears when I was alone, coming from no particular direction. They were soft, almost like someone muttering behind a door. I checked the apartment, called out, but no one answered. The candle still burned. By the end of the week, I was avoiding the kitchen at night. Each time I entered, the air would thicken and the shadows would grow longer, creeping toward me like they wanted something. And yet the candle never went out, even when I left the room for hours. I started keeping a journal, trying to rationalize the experiences, but every entry only made me feel more trapped. The candle felt like a tether to something I could not name. The second week brought the first physical evidence of something wrong. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of scratching. It came from the kitchen. I froze, listening. It was faint at first, like nails against wood, but gradually grew louder, more deliberate. I got out of bed, holding a flashlight, and shone it toward the source. The candle was on, as always, burning brighter than the light around it. The scratching had stopped. The kitchen floor was empty. No sign of rats, no fallen dishes, nothing. And yet I knew I had not imagined it. The whispers grew more insistent, almost forming words I could not understand. I began to feel watched constantly, as though the shadows themselves were sentient. I noticed the flame sometimes moved, leaning towards certain corners of the room, as if drawn to something invisible. I tried recording it on my phone. The video showed only the candle burning steadily, but my own voice could be heard whispering words I did not remember speaking. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped leaving the apartment at night. Even in the day, the candles seemed to draw the shadows closer, twisting the light into grotesque shapes. I felt an oppressive weight on my chest whenever I entered the kitchen, like an unseen presence had settled in. One night, I woke to find the candle on the floor, surrounded by a circle of darkened wax that had not been there before. The flame hovered above it, bright and perfect, as if suspended in midair. I reached to touch it and felt a sudden chill run through my arm, deep into my bones. The shadows stretched and recoiled around me, and I could swear I heard laughter, low and cruel, echoing from the walls. I tried leaving again, packing my things, but the candle reappeared on the counter no matter where I placed it. I began to see the edges of the room shift in ways they could not physically shift. Hallways extended, corners disappeared, and the shadows grew darker than the night outside. Sleep became impossible. The whispers began calling my name, not always correctly, sometimes distorting it into a grotesque mockery, always with the same insistence. I realized with horror that the candle was the source, the center of the influence spreading through the apartment. And it would not die. By the third week, my mind was fraying. I could feel the candle watching me, waiting for something. I started marking the walls with chalk, circles and crosses around the candle, hoping to contain it, but the marks would fade overnight. The candle's flame burned brighter when I woke to check, as if it were feeding on my fear. I began hearing footsteps in the hall, heavy, deliberate, pacing back and forth outside my door. I called the landlord, but he said the apartment had been empty for months. No other tenants existed on my floor. I tried recording the sound, but when I played it back, there was only silence, nothing but the low hum of electricity. One night, I saw a figure in the reflection of the window, not in the apartment, but behind me, though I had been alone. It was tall and thin, featureless, with a faint glow from the candle reflecting in what might have been eyes. I spun around and there was nothing. When I looked back at the window, the figure had moved closer, though there was no way it could have. The candle seemed to respond to my fear. Its flame grew taller when I panicked, swayed toward me in a subtle, predatory way. I could feel its heat even when standing across the room, and sometimes I swore it whispered to me directly, a voice scraping at my mind. I started keeping the apartment in darkness, only lighting the candle during the day, hoping it would weaken. It did not. Shadows pooled around it, stretching unnaturally, forming shapes that resembled hands, faces, figures pressed close. I could feel them staring, moving just outside my vision, always reaching toward the flame. I started having visions when I closed my eyes. The candle burning in empty rooms, in forests, in places I had never been. Figures gathered around it, always silent, always watching. In the dreams, the candle never went out. When I woke, the candle in my apartment was always burning, always taller than I remembered, as if it had grown in the night. I realized then that the candle was not a thing. It was a presence, a sentinel, or perhaps a seed of something far older and crueler than I could understand. The building, my apartment, even the shadows themselves seemed to obey it, and it would not leave. The fourth week brought full-blown terror. I could no longer leave my apartment for fear the candle would spread beyond the walls. The shadows became aggressive, slamming doors, pushing furniture, whispering in a chorus that grew louder with each passing night. I rarely slept. When I did, nightmares consumed me entirely, leaving me screaming and drenched in sweat. I tried burning the candle again, but it did not melt. It did not flicker. Water splashed on it only caused steam, but the flame remained tall and cruel. Once, in a fit of desperation, I threw it into the sink and poured boiling water over it. The wax hardened into a blackened blob, but the flame hovered above, perfect and alive, like it had never been extinguished. I started hearing voices in the apartment during the day. Not whispers, but low murmurs, as if the walls themselves were speaking. They spoke my thoughts, my fears, my memories, twisting them into things I could not recognize. Sometimes I felt hands brush my shoulders or a cold breath on my neck. Every time I turned, there was nothing. One night, I found scratches on the walls around the candle, deep gouges that I did not remember making. Shapes of hands, claws, faces pressed into plaster, and a single word carved into the wood of the counter: stay. I could not tell if it was a warning or a command. I stopped trying to understand it. I stopped trying to fight. The apartment became a prison, the candle a tyrant. My reflection in mirrors was distorted. Sometimes it would smile when I did not. Sometimes it would move when I did not. I began recording everything, hoping to find evidence of what I was experiencing. The footage never showed the candle's flame moving, never captured the shadows or the figures. But my own reflection screamed at the camera, twisted and unrecognizable. I knew then that I was not alone. Something lived in the apartment with me. It fed on fear, grew stronger with attention, and it was anchored by the candle. Leaving was impossible. The flame was the center, the sun around which all horror revolved, and I had no way to stop it. By the 5th week, I had stopped trying to sleep. I barricaded myself in my bedroom, hoping to avoid the presence, but it followed me everywhere. The shadows pooled under the door, thick and viscous, pressing against the wood as if testing it, waiting for me to succumb. I could hear faint murmurs of laughter, low and relentless, and the occasional screeching cry that sounded human, yet wrong, impossible to trace to any source. I dare not go into the kitchen, but hunger forced me eventually. The candle was there, exactly where it had always been. Its flame burned higher than ever, almost as though it was observing me. I tried to blow it out one last time. My lungs burned, my arms shook. I screamed, I threw my body at it. I cursed and begged. The flame wavered, but did not die. I felt a sudden pull in my chest, a pressure that twisted the air in the room, and I realized I could not leave. I could never leave. The walls themselves began to warp. The apartment seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Corners disappeared. Hallways multiplied. Doors led to voids of darkness. The candle floated slightly above the counter now, untethered, as if it had grown larger overnight. Its light revealed faces pressed against the walls, hands emerging from shadows, figures standing in impossible positions, staring at me with empty eyes. I screamed and fled to my bedroom, slamming the door and locking it. But I could hear it moving. The candle's flame pulsed through the walls, stretching shadows into my room. I felt cold hands wrap around my ankles, tugging. I could hear whispers in the corners of my mind, repeating my name over and over, twisting it into something alien. The floor trembled. The apartment itself seemed alive, breathing with me, trapped inside. Then I understood. The candle did not belong to me. I belonged to it. It would never leave, and I would never escape. The flames in every reflection, in every shadow, in every crack in the walls were its eyes, its voice, its endless hunger. I realized I was no longer alone in my own body. I could feel it crawling under my skin, shaping my thoughts, laughing at my fear, feeding on my life. I do not know how long it has been. Hours, days, weeks, or years. Time has no meaning here. The candle still burns on the counter. It burns brighter when I look at it, and I cannot stop myself from staring. I am aware only of it and the shadows, of whispers that speak only my name, of a presence that will never leave. Sometimes I dream of moving away, of leaving the apartment and the candle behind, but I wake to find it burning still, waiting. It has consumed the apartment, the building, my mind, and perhaps one day it will leave my body entirely to consume something else. I am trapped and it will never go out.